Shut up and sit down.
All right, so the second part, we're going to jump into the topic a little bit deeper, give us a little bit more time to kind of chat about it. But first, again, we've got empty glasses again. Laurent, come on, what's going on?
This is not how good political discussion happens.
My apologies, sincerest apologies. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a maple amber. I tapped my maple trees in the back here, made maple syrup. I then threw it into the beer. Apparently this season was so incredibly sweet that it raised the alcohol level quite significantly. It is a 7.9%.
Boom.
But it certainly doesn't taste like it.
So it's going to get rock and roll here, guys.
Right.
I would hope so.
So we're doing small samplers, but at 7.9, like, and that's a good
that
class.
was generous
The last one was a little bit less generous, but there we go.
I believe you'll really like this one.
There we go.
Enjoy.
And you got it. Wait, remember?
You got it. Cheers.
No spin and always cheers your beers are the rules on this show. So cheers, guys.
Oh my god, I love it.
Oh, that's really good.
I think we found our favorite so far.
I don't know that there's a lot of breakfast beers out there, but that would be a killer breakfast beer.
Oh, this is awesome. Breakfast or dessert beer.
That with pancakes or whatever, that would be amazing. Okay.
Really, I was thinking a side of bacon, but...
Bacon too.
Right? That's salt and sweet.
Oh man, that is really good.
Guys, I don't know where you can get Laurent's beer. This one.
He charges a very high premium. You pay your QST and all that sort of good stuff too, right? But anyways, all right. So we'll continue on with the topic, and I think what we'll talk about first off is about opinions and informing the opinions and that sort of thing. So let's break it down into first off like engagement. We've done the traditional route of engagement, so there was something that made us interested enough to get involved. And then we, associate ourselves with a party. But that is, for most people, I mean, if you look at party membership numbers, that's not the average person. It definitely isn't. So, let's talk about other forms of engagement.
I think there's all kinds of engagement you can do with politics. Mm-hmm. And like we said, right, as simple as reading the news so that you are informed. But you can also engage in the political sphere and government sphere in different ways.
Yep.
Right? There's lots of charities, there's lots of grassroots organizations you can get involved in. Many that you probably don't even realize have political agendas. And I think that's a really powerful way to get engaged. But a lot of getting engaged is just forming an opinion.
Yes.
And being willing to engage with that opinion with others. Right? Now, hopefully that means that you are somebody who can change their opinion depending on, research and what's happening and changing information.
Absolutely.
But being willing to have an opinion, feeling that you have the right to have an opinion, that's really powerful. That is engaging.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about this. I don't know if it was on camera or off camera last time after the episode. But I think I'm always thinking kind of in the back of my head, the opinion that I'm expressing, where is it coming from? What is the root of it? And who am I speaking for? Am I speaking exclusively for myself? If I'm associating with, a group, an association or something. We both represented different associations. And there's opinions that they have that maybe we don't agree with, or, we help them form opinions that are more effective, that sort of thing. But, how do we, that opinion that you create and that you're willing to vocalize, how do you make sure that it's valid? Because I think the biggest thing that we have to remember is if you're going to put it out there, you have to be prepared to be challenged on it. I think that's the biggest thing, right? You can put stuff out and leave it and allow people to come at you and not respond to it, but you have to be willing and prepared for perhaps a negative response to what you're saying. Yeah,
and it's tough. Initially when you said the word valid, I actually wanted to challenge you on it, right? Because the problem with connotation of words is that that can actually conflate what we mean. And so when you say opinion, I go, well, everyone's entitled to their opinion, right or wrong. It's your opinion, right?
Yeah.
But it does have to be valid if you're going to go out and defend it. So that's where some of the challenge comes in, I think. But I think the most important part is you're creating an opinion that you are basing on, doesn't have to be tons of research. I'm not saying go out and read textbooks and talk to professors, but hopefully you're reading a variety of news, a variety of products, watching them, engaging with different people. Yep. So that when you form an informed opinion, you can defend it. You do have to defend it, right? And you also have to, at a certain point, you have to stick with it. Like if you're going to go out and protest, you have to be ready to defend and stick with that position. And that's a good thing. But
this is a thing that kind of troubles me about it. Well, that's it. I mean, I've held opinions, through my lifetime about different issues, and because I'm challenged on them, and perhaps in the past I would have been willing to get out there and hold the banner and yell about it and get angry, but because I've been able to kind of listen and reflect on that sort of thing. I've been able to kind of change my opinions and grow in that sort of stuff. But at the same time, I gotta think there's some issues that if they're core to you and there's something that you really strongly believe in and you believe that you're educated to the point that you really need to be educated on it, or it's something that you're just unwilling to change your view on. I mean, if somebody is going to continue to challenge you on that and you make that explicit that no, this is my honest belief, this is a core value to me. Should they persist or do they have an obligation to continue to challenge you, or should they just respect the fact that you've made that opinion and you just disagree? I
mean, it brings up two great scenarios that we were talking about earlier, though, right? It brings up Professor Peterson at U of T, and it also brings up the Women's March after Donald Trump is elected, right? I mean, those are really firm opinions. They
are hot topics, that's for sure.
Both of those men have very firm beliefs, and they have defended them, they have expressed them, they are sticking to them. The opposition hasn't quieted, right? The groups that disagree with them, that think they are wrong, are loud. I mean, in one instance, they're loud to the tune of 3 million people marching across the U.S.
And around the world, to be honest.
And around the world, I mean, more millions around the world. So, should they be quiet?
No, and I think, that's the thing, right? Like, touch on the Peterson issue as well. I mean, they're a voice that's kind of bubbled to the top. Right?
Sure.
And I think when you have really kind of difficult issues you're dealing with, and I would argue that perhaps the Peterson issue is a little bit more nuanced than the Trump issue.
Yes, much more nuanced.
But I think when people are very passionate about things, I think you can sometimes you run into a real issue of people getting just plain pissed off, and then you're not having a discussion at that point. I think that's what I get frustrated too when it comes to politics, and I think that's what you were talking before about yelling in the House and that sort of thing. That's one thing, right? When MPs are yelling back and forth at each other across the floor, that's one thing. But it's part of the show. When you have people literally standing on the streets screaming at each other, that's not a show. That's all right. How do we have better dialogues? And how do we encourage people to have discussions? And when they get to the point where they are definitely not going to be able to convince one or the other that they're wrong or that they're right, how do we respectfully walk away from that? I think that's a real challenge we're running into right now with groups from either side of a ton of different topics. So how do we get to the point? How do we make people? How do we get people to really respectfully disagree with each other?
I don't know, that's a tough question. It's a tough question too because it also calls into question, should groups be protesting, right? And I personally believe that 100%. They should. I think that protest is a really excellent 100%. Form. Peaceful protest, I'll qualify that.
Yes.
Is a really excellent form and one of our most important democratic rights, right? There's not a lot of ways as citizens that we be heard en masse. Except for that, it's really tough. But the challenge with protest is exactly what you're saying. Mm-hmm. It can be really hard to start a discussion. And it takes a really big person to walk up to the leader of a protest or the core group and say, I respect your right to protest. I'm glad that you're here. Mm-hmm. Can we have a conversation about this? Because I would like to understand your point of view better. And I respect that you have a lot of support, here and behind you, but I actually need to understand the issue. And whether that's done as, an individual walking down the street and sees a protest, or as an elected official, or as, someone from a think tank, as someone from the opposite side, I think that is how we get there.
Yeah.
But that has to show mutual respect. Yes, they're here, they're loud, they're yelling,
Yeah.
or they're loud in the media, they're doing tons of press conferences about this issue. They're, we don't feel that we're getting a chance to speak and share our side. There is a point where you have to be the bigger person.
Yeah.
And walk over and say, okay, you've been in the media, you've done 8 press conferences, whatever the case is.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard your side really loudly, but can we talk about it?
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a public forum, but
No.
you have a lot of support for this, or you are so passionate about it that it must mean something.
Yeah, and I think, the whole kind of background behind Pints and Politics too is, I think back to, when I was growing up, we had a lot of neighborhood get-togethers and that sort of thing. And some of the really interesting conversations that I was able to kind of drop in on were, sitting out on somebody's back deck. And these are, you're talking about issues that are pretty core to people and like how it's affecting their daily life. But I think the way that I kind of develop my view of politics is that you got to remember that we would leave the deck after having the beers and that sort of stuff, and we'd go back to our house and we'd wake up tomorrow and we'd open the door and those people are still our neighbors.
Yes.
And so that's, I think, what people forget often is that, yes, you may be at a big rally arguing against something, but you're going to go home and you're going to walk out the door the next day, and those people are still your neighbors. They're still people that you're going to work with. They're still people that you're engaging with. Your friends and family. And I've had some incredibly passionate discussions with even my sisters about stuff. And it's, you have to realign that with, all right, I disagree with you vehemently, but I can respect you. And that's I think that's a thing. And I perhaps the more, that kind of instigation, that reason why you got involved in politics in the first place, the reason why you started caring about it, you became very passionate. It's inspired by conversations with neighbors probably in the first place, or things you're reading and you're getting educated about that sort of thing. But you still need to be able to walk away from it and be respectful and understand that the court system, the legislation as it exists, the system that we function in allows for dissent and opinions. I mean, I think there's, in most cases when there's Supreme Court decisions or, even Superior Court decisions and that sort of thing, I guess it would be restricted to Supreme Court. If I'm going to look like an idiot on camera. But anyways, that there are dissenting opinions, right? And those are just as valuable. When you look at, how people study the law, there are dissenting opinions. And I think that's what we really need to kind of, perhaps maybe that's something that we need to get back into the education system is you have to allow for dissenting opinions. You can't just shout that person down.
And I think it's also learning how to have dissenting opinions, right? It's learning how to have an argument when you're younger. It's learning how to sit at the Thanksgiving table with your family and have half the table on one side, half the table on the other. Maybe everyone's split up, right? Yeah. And be able to have a really great discussion. Yeah. Maybe it's loud. I mean, in my family it would be loud.
Always loud.
Really
yes.
loud.
Yeah.
But have a loud discussion with differing opinions and have that be okay. And I think, and be fine with it at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
You and I are really good friends. We are definitely not on the same political team.
No.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't change that we have beers together. And we don't always talk about politics.
No.
And I think that is a big piece of it is you have to recognize at a certain point that it's just differing opinions and you probably have a lot of the same common values. I remember when I first started working for the Liberal Party, and my family, it was like they were almost afraid to talk about politics with me. Like they were afraid to say things that were against the Liberal Party. They were afraid to say things to me. They were afraid to make me upset. Yeah. And it took a really loud conversation one day where I finally at the end of it said, this was awesome. Yeah. I want to hear this. Yeah. I want to understand what you feel and what you believe and what's important to you. Yep. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make me mad that you're not a liberal. That's fine. But it's important that we do this. Yeah.
Well, because I mean, like when I was on the Hill too, it was, you had, like, every time I'd run into somebody and they'd ask, oh, where do you work? And you say, oh, I work on the Hill for an MP. And you're expected to defend every piece of legislation, every opinion that's been put out there, every view of every MP that wears the same color that you wear. But I didn't agree with some legislation. I don't agree with some legislation.
The world just doesn't work that way.
But it does, yeah. It's not a black and white thing, and I think that's the hard part, is that, you know, you shouldn't be boxed into you know, a specific brand necessarily. But I think that's the great thing about being on the outside of politics, is you don't have to be in that. I mean, Lauren, who's standing behind the camera right now, which I think should maybe give us a little bit more time just to talk about this. You know, I'm a conservative, but like, you know, she's not somebody who's involved in politics particularly. You know, she votes and that sort of stuff, but it's not something that she's incredibly passionate about. But she's allowed to have opinions. And I can challenge her on those opinions, and she certainly challenges me on my opinions, political or otherwise. But you know, you can have that dissent, and that, I think that's the really nice part about being outside of politics, is that you can have that dissent.
It is, yeah. You don't have to. You
don't feel
you can still, yeah. You can still very much, as we both do, align ourselves, have memberships.
Yep.
To, or rather, we don't anymore, but have memberships to certain parties.
I mean, I do,
but but you know, you can still do that, but that doesn't mean you have to agree with every single thing. No. And it's actually one of the things that I think currently in the Canadian partisan system is great, right? Yeah. Yes, there are a certain number of official parties, but there are other options too. It's not a two-party system, and that's actually really great. You don't have to get so, and I hate using this word, but I'm going to, dogmatic about the color that you're wearing, that you have to support them, or feel that you should support them, or feel that you're, you know, a traitor if you don't. And that's the great thing, right? Like, there are lots of, you know, there's red Tories, there's blue Grits, there's NDP who lean a little bit to the center, and they voted Liberal last election. And that is the really great thing, right? That is, frankly, when you're not an elected member of parliament, and even when you are, but when you're not, you really don't have to toe the party line. You are allowed to have a spectrum of opinions and a spectrum of values, and depending on the election and the party and what's happening at that point, you can say, that team that I've always loved and that I've always supported,
don't agree with, and I'm
actually, you know, that one issue or those two issues, I can't. I just can't. And that is really important in the Canadian system. Yeah,
no, I totally agree. I think, you know, we do have the spectrum of opinions that you can have, but I also find it funny, you know, in setting up these, you know, setting up the episodes and that sort of stuff. I talk to, you know, political folks and otherwise, and even journalists and that sort of thing. And it's, hey, do you want to come on and like we can talk about this topic? And they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to put it out there, you know, how I feel about this, that, or the other. But that kind of, to be honest, that freaks me out a little bit, because I really think that, you know, if you're working on the Hill, or you're working for a news agency or otherwise, you still have your own views and opinions. And look, I'm not here to say that, you know, you should come on here and shoot your party down, or, you know, whatever, put yourself in a precarious situation or that sort of thing. But I think that people now, especially in the social media age, you either have the people that are out there and putting everything out, and they're just totally dumping everything onto Facebook and whatever else, and they want everybody to read it, or you have the people that insulate themselves and they don't want to put the opinions out there because, is it okay for them to have an opinion? And that's it at the end of the day.
And I think that that's what's so interesting, right? You then watch a show, you know, you watch Liz Plank on Fox, and like, I mean, I think Liz Plank is awesome, but I think that is really impressive journalism. She reports facts. It's also very much her opinion. Yeah. And that is great. She's out there. She's not afraid to share it. She does it in an accessible, awesome way. You don't have to agree with it. Yeah. But you can access it and you can relate to it and then decide if you agree or don't agree. Yep. And that's amazing, right? Yeah, that's really awesome. You can judge a little bit based on your gut. Like, oh, I really love what she just said. That's amazing. Or, ooh, that gave me a reaction I'm not so comfortable with. I need to go figure out what that means for me.
No, I totally agree. I mean, that's where you get what we were talking about, is you get the open discussion with the ability for dissent.
Exactly.
That's it. I mean, that's the key to our system. So anyways, let's jump into the next beer. We're going to finish this up. We might have a full glass. We'll see. Anyways, we'll get right back to you in a minute. Cheers.
Cheers.